My name is Renata Voss. I'm 41 years old. And my whole life, my family called me the quiet one, the boring one, the one who just does spreadsheets. They never once imagined that the boring one owned the room they were standing in. That night, under the chandeliers of the Aldridge Ballroom, my sister stood at the microphone with my diary in her hand, reading my private words out loud to 200 guests, laughing as she did it. And she had no idea that the woman who signed her catering contract, her lighting contract, her valet contract, was me. I watched her mouth open to read the next line. I watched my mother nod along, delighted. I watched Desmond, my future brother-in-law, lean back in his chair with a smug little smile, like he was watching a show made just for him, and I reached very calmly for my phone. Welcome back to Quiet Verdict Stories. If stories of quiet strength and calm justice are why you're here, take a second to subscribe and turn on the bell, so the next one finds you. And before we begin, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now, let me take you back to where this all started. 6 months earlier, I sat at the end of my parents' dining table, in the seat that had been mine since childhood, the one closest to the kitchen, the one nobody ever fought over. My sister Camille was announcing her engagement for what felt like the 9th time that evening, holding her hand up so the ring caught the light every time someone spoke, turning her wrist this way and that like she was modeling it for a catalog. 3 carats, she said. Desmond wanted the best. He said nothing less would do for me. My mother clasped her hands together like she was witnessing a miracle. Of course he did. He's a real provider, not like some men who just coast through life. I knew that line was aimed at me. I'd been divorced 2 years by then. Renata still doing her little numbers job? My father asked, not looking up from his plate, cutting his chicken with the same flat disinterest he'd had my whole life. I run event operations, I said, for hospitality properties across the state. He said, like I'd told him I collected bottle caps for a living. Camille leaned toward our mother, stage whispering the way she always did when she wanted the whole table to hear every word. She's renting a 1-bedroom, Mom. At her age, I smiled and said nothing, because I had learned, over 41 years, that silence cost me nothing, and explanations cost me everything. I didn't tell them that her little numbers job meant I was the managing director of 3 luxury event properties across the state, including the very ballroom my sister had just booked, sight unseen, through a broker who never once mentioned the owner's name because I'd asked him not to. Some things, I'd learned a long time ago, were better left unsaid, until they mattered. I need $40,000, she said. No greeting, no small talk. The venue increased their deposit. Desmond's parents already gave what they're giving. Mom says you have savings just sitting there doing nothing. I have a retirement account, I said, that I built myself, dollar by dollar, for 15 years. And I'm your sister, she said. Like that single fact settled every argument on earth. Family helps family, or is that only a rule when it benefits you? I've helped this family plenty, I said quietly. Nobody ever remembers that part. Because you never let us forget it, she snapped. You're not impressive, Renata. You're alone. I let that sit in the silence for a moment, long enough that I could hear her breathing on the other end, waiting for me to fold the way I usually did. I'm not giving you $40,000, Camille. Then don't come to the wedding. It's not that much money to someone like you, someone like me, I repeated. You know what I mean. You've always been careful with money, sensible. Camille's not built that way. She never has been. She needs help. You could just give it to her, and it would fix everything between the two of you. It would fix nothing, I said. It would just teach her that if she yells long enough, someone always pays. My mother sighed the exact sigh she'd been sighing at me since I was 12 years old. Just a very old, very familiar tiredness, the kind that lives in your shoulders after enough years of being the one who's asked to bend. What none of them knew, what I let them believe, because their assumptions were useful to me, was that I already held something that mattered far more than $40,000. From when we were teenagers. It's hilarious, actually. I might read a little bit at the rehearsal dinner, just for fun. Nothing serious. Don't be dramatic about it. Don't, I said, and for the first time in the conversation, my voice carried an edge she couldn't ignore. Relax, she said. laughing. It's just funny. You used to write the weirdest stuff, going on about wanting to run something big someday. It's cute, honestly. I said nothing else. But that night, I bought a small item online. A slim smartwatch with a hidden voice memo function. Nothing dramatic. Nothing anyone would ever notice on my wrist. I charged it, set it up, tested it twice in my kitchen to make sure the recording came through clean, and slid it into a drawer, waiting. Some women prepare a toast for events like these. I prepared evidence. The night of the rehearsal dinner, I stood in front of my closet for a long time before I chose exactly what I wanted to wear. I am 41, dark brown hair cut into a clean shoulder-length bob, a few strands of early gray I've stopped bothering to hide, fair olive skin, the kind that tans instead of burns. Average height, solid build, not thin, not soft, the frame of a woman who's spent 15 years on her feet running properties, walking ballrooms and kitchens. And I wore a deep emerald green silk blouse, buttoned high at the collar, tucked into black tailored trousers with a sharp crease pressed down the front of each leg, a thin gold watch on my left wrist, the one doing the recording, and small gold hoop earrings. Nothing flashy, nothing that asked to be noticed. Black low-heeled pumps, practical enough to walk the length of a ballroom without making a sound. My only other jewelry was a slim silver pen clipped inside my blazer pocket, the kind you'd use to sign a contract, not that anyone in that room would have guessed what it was for. The Aldridge Ballroom filled with 200 guests by 7 p.m., crystal chandeliers, ivory drapery pulled back in soft folds, a string quartet tuning quietly in the corner. My family had no idea I'd approved every detail of that design 6 months earlier, back when the booking broker submitted the paperwork under Camille and Desmond's names, and I recognized my own sister's wedding date scrolling past on my own operations calendar, like any other Tuesday client. At 8:17 p.m., Camille tapped a fork against her champagne glass and stood up at the small stage, where the MC usually spoke. My old diary clutched in her other hand like a party favor. "I found something hilarious," she announced into the microphone, holding the diary up so the cover caught the light, my handwriting visible even from my table near the back. My sister Renata's old diary. Listen to this, you guys. This is too good. She read my private words about feeling invisible in my own family, about lying awake at 17, wanting, someday, to build something so big they'd finally have to see me. The room laughed in places that weren't meant to be funny at all. My mother laughed loudest of everyone, wiping at the corner of her eye like it was the best joke she'd heard all year. I reached up and tapped my watch twice under the table, activating the recording. My thumb steady, my face perfectly still, my pulse not moving even slightly. "And here's my favorite part," Camille said, grinning out at the crowd, playing to them now like a comedian working a room. She wrote, quote, "Someday I'll own something they can't take from me. Real ambitious for someone renting a one-bedroom apartment at 41. The room roared. I stood. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clean across the ballroom without needing any microphone at all. "I do own something. Every vendor you fought with over pricing was hired, trained, and paid by me. And everything you've said tonight, and every threat you've made about my money for the last 3 weeks, is recorded on this watch, right now, while you're all still watching." The laughter stopped like a dropped glass. At 8:22 p.m., the ballroom's general manager, a calm, gray-haired man named Mr. Okafor, who had worked for me for 9 years, walked in through the side doors with 2 members of hotel security, exactly as I'd instructed him to weeks earlier. "No problem," I said, "just clarifying ownership for everyone in the room." He nodded once. "Understood. We'll follow whatever you need, ma'am." Desmond stood up, red-faced, his chair scraping loud against the floor. "This is insane. You're lying. There's no way." "Check the deed," I said. "Or check the name on the LLC that owns this building. Voss Hospitality Group. It's public record, Desmond. You could have looked it up any time." My mother's face went the color of the tablecloth. "You never asked," I said. "You just assumed I had nothing worth knowing. So why would you bother asking?" Camille's composure cracked completely, the diary shaking in her hand, her voice climbing an octave. "You did this on purpose. You let us book this place to humiliate us in front of everyone." "No," I said. "I let you book it because it was already yours to book, same as any other client. I just never corrected your assumptions about who was standing behind the counter. There's a difference, Camille. She turned on our mother instantly, the way desperate people always turn on whoever's standing closest. You told me to ask her for money. You said she owed us, you said she'd never say no if I pushed. I didn't know any of this. I swear I didn't. You knew enough, I said quietly. You knew I was someone like me. Careful, sensible, good for money when it was convenient, but never good enough for respect. The room was dead silent now. 200 strangers watching my family's careful, curated image collapse in real time, phones quietly lowering into laps. I looked at Camille, who was still holding my diary against her chest, like it could shield her from what was coming. You said I was never impressive, I said, that I was alone. Turns out the woman standing alone in this family is the one who owns the room you're all standing in. Okafor, and walked out of the Aldridge ballroom at 8:29 p.m., my heels perfectly silent against the marble, my pulse, even then, still even and unhurried. If you're watching this, and someone in your life has ever made you feel small for being quiet, careful, or private about what you're building, let this be your reminder. You don't owe anyone a preview of your success. You don't owe them access to your money, your time, or your dignity just because you happen to share their blood. Protect your peace the same way you'd protect anything valuable, quietly, without announcement, and absolutely without apology. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button and subscribe so the next one finds you exactly when you need it most.